Hi,
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Yes, good morning, and welcome to another broadcast of AccessTV.org, where you're always going to hear the undisputed truth. It's October the 18th, pretty brisky day outside. Autumn is certainly here in New England. We're going to continue our series on redlining and gentrification. Today, we're going to gravitate into the area of public education. My special guest today is Dr. Maya Bowen. Now, this is kind of a continuation of a conversation that she had with a gentleman by the name of Russell Williams last week. If any of you have seen any of our series, we would recommend that you do watch it and tune in, because this is a continuation of some of the work that we've done in the last 4 years. I want to introduce you to Dr. Maya Bowen. Doc, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm trying to get you on my show for a while, but somebody beat me to it.
Thank you for having me.
As I had mentioned to the audience, we're going to continue our conversation that you had last week with Russell Williams on the subject of public education, specifically in Hartford. Mm-hmm. But before we do that, Dr. Bowens, I want you to share with our audience your journey to becoming a PhD in education.
Oh, okay. Well, my journey is one that nobody actually foresaw as being something that was even possible. First and foremost, I am a Hartford native, born and raised. I understand education to be one of the foundational valuable elements in our current society, and it always really has been. And from that perspective, growing up in Hartford, being raised by my mom, who was disabled at a very young age, she planted the seeds in me that I was unaware would grow into the garden that it has become, whereby, going through the Hartford public school system, I was a major truant, and it happened to be that because of my mom's disability and because of the way I had to assist her during times of just major hardships, she somehow interwove the significance and value of education, whereby with me missing a lot of days in school as a truant, she actually allowed for there to be a focus in on education as the way to rise above poverty and come on out of poverty.
And that indicates that you made some serious sacrifices when you were a young person, which is quite amazing in this journey that you have taken. So you need to be really proud of what you have accomplished, because it was not easy. Now, I do want to mention that you are one of my niece's friends. You guys came up in the same era, and I think that maybe your generation was probably the last generation that we can reach nowadays. But that's a subject that we'll talk about a little bit today. Mm-hmm. But what I want to do right now is I want to continue on some of the themes that you were talking about last week, okay, because as I was weighing in on your interview with Mr. Russell Williams, there were some things that you touched on that I'd like to get a little bit more detail on. Okay. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to do some hypotheticals. Okay. We're going to talk about the Hartford school system and public education in general. Okay. So why don't we do this? If in fact you were superintendent of schools in the city of Hartford, what would be your first thing that you would do when you sat in that seat in terms of the overall conditions of the Hartford public school system? What would be the first task that you would take on?
Wow, that's a really deep and strategically structured question, because it's a lot that's going on within the system, because we're in a system that is multi-layered. But one of the first things that I actually would do in relationship to understanding what the system actually happens to have currently and where we've come from is definitely, I would do what's called a SWOT analysis.
Okay.
SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Okay, so we have to have understanding of the environment in which we are engaging positive and productive activities in. So that means that we have an understanding of the individuals that currently hold certain positions within that particular system, as well as the motivational factors that are driving them to act in certain ways within that system.
Okay, and which means that you are looking at people who are dedicated to their profession and most importantly dedicated to the students. But let me ask you about something specific that really exists in North Hartford. North Hartford, troubling to say, is at a 50% literacy rate, which means that 50% of the residents in North Hartford cannot read. Now, if you correlate the 50% to the years of schooling that people had, that means that 5 generations, and a generation is 10 years, so 5 generations of our residents in North Hartford fell through the cracks in 2018 because they cannot read. Now, this is very, very troubling, and these are statistics that people do not want folks to know publicly.
Right.
But I'm just going to let you know that 50% of the people in North Hartford cannot read, and this is part of the egregious conditions that people in North Hartford are living in because they live in the red zone. They live in redline, slavery sanctioned conditions, and it's a challenge to just be able to survive in that environment alone. 50% literacy rate. If you became superintendent and you inherited that particular problem, how would you go about addressing that? Now, these are specifics that we're talking about. I just asked you about generalities. What would you do? You sat down in that seat and you gave us an overview on critiquing your administration, which is the most important thing, because these people are working with our children, and they need to, and they're at the top level from the superintendent's office, and then of course that trickles down to the classroom. 50% literacy rate. How would you deal with that?
Well, first off, I want to address how you described it as they fell through the cracks. I would we want to say that if I restructured that, they didn't fall through the cracks. They actually were strategically positioned in those cracks. Interestingly enough, if we look at the motivation, if we look at the value placed upon individuals within this particular system, you'll get a better understanding of where they currently are. So 50% is just touching the crust in terms of numbers, because when we look at a system, everybody is looking at the numbers, but we have to bring it back to a foundation whereby we're looking at the individuals that are being impacted and exposed to a system that has motivations that obviously have not placed a high enough value on the constituency at large. Now, you're talking 5 generations, so that means that individuals that comprise a 50-year time span have gone through 12 years of education based on how the system is structured. Yet, after those 12 years, if at that point they've been passed along through the system not having the adequate reading capabilities or skill sets, then you begin to look at, in terms of employment, what type of competition is out there for those that have been adequately prepared to take positions within these organizations that provide employment for our community.
But I'm talking about something very simple, and that's being able to, say, help your child with their homework when they come home. So how could a parent who cannot read be able to help their children with their homework? These are the type of things that I'm talking about. These are just simple things like, it's just like sending your child to school without breakfast. How could the child come home and say, Mom, Dad, can you help me with my homework? And then, what is the parent going to say? Well, no, I got to go do something else because they can't read.
Right.
Okay. So, that's just a simplistic example of what I'm talking about here.
Right.
Never mind them being able to go out into the system and get a job. There are some jobs with very little skill set where people can just work with their hands and all. But now we live in a highly technical society now.
Right.
And you have to at least be able to read numbers or take commands, look at some kind of instruction, and that entails reading.
Right. Yes, it does. So let's play this scenario. So a child comes home and Mom or Dad is asked a question to help them with the homework assignment. One of the things that I found out in relation to that is that once you become an adult, your priorities shift. So at the point that you can't read and you have children, there's going to be that placement of priority that is going to dictate how it is that you govern your house, how it is that you relate to your children.
Right.
Usually anybody that is in a subservient role, so parent to child, it typically is going to be you only rise as high as the leadership.
Okay.
And the parents being the leadership in the house. So when you place a spotlight on areas such as reading, if a parent is deficient and the parent does not value becoming more proficient in that area of reading, then at the level that the child is being exposed to foundational reading skills, it becomes a challenge for the parent who is deficient in the area to actually try to bridge that gap. So then it becomes one of those issues where we have to look at, so how do we bridge that gap?
Right.
As a parent, priorities, again, shift from, okay, I'm in education mode to I need to make sure we have a roof over our head, heat in the house, hot running water, all those things, make sure it's food on the table. So the basic needs of individuals becomes priority versus education. So there's a shift in the dynamic in terms of, okay, I know I can't read well, but am I going to want to develop these skills alongside my child in order to help my child? So it's all about,
there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that at all.
One of the things that I've learned is that an investment in yourself is never time or money wasted. So we sit down and we look at things from a broad perspective.
Right.
And by coming up with a broad, let's say, strategy, sometimes it becomes a little bit too broad because we have to deal with things from an individual basis.
Right.
And the onus is always going to be on the individual to want to rise above where they currently are. And without having the motivation or not being somewhat interested in going to a different place or to a different level, then a lot of times we see individuals wanting to be content with where they're currently at.
That's true.
So it's an individual thing.
And I, in my experience, I had the opportunity to be an executive member of the Greater Hartford Literacy Volunteers. And of course, there are different type of formulas that you can use to deal with that problem. It could be the one-on-one, it could be group, but as long as the person, is motivated to be able to, do something about their reading skills. Doesn't matter if they're learning in tandem with their child. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Matter of fact, it may put them in a better comfort zone to do that. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a little break here, and we're going to continue this conversation in our next segment.
This is the seat of power for Hartford's municipal government. This is 550 Main Street, Hartford City Hall. In fact, it is the place where all the decisions are made, okay? Did you know that every bad decision, every bad policy is made by somebody elected to office? If you think your vote doesn't matter, you're wrong. Every vote counts. It's probably those of you that don't vote that make the biggest contribution to who gets into office. Well, we want to change that. November the 10th at 12 o'clock noon, I'm going to stand on the steps of this building and make an announcement, and I want you to come on out and be with me. Right here in front of Hartford City Hall for the decision. Hartford Municipal Building, November the 10th. Rain or shine, snow, sleet, hail, makes no difference. I need you to come on out, make your voice heard. If you're tired of being sick and tired, now's the time to make a difference.
Okay, in the last segment, we were talking about, the family environment and, who plays what role, in the household. The provider is the parents, of course, and then the children are the student in a sense. But then we talked about maybe ways to deal with the parents not being able to read sufficiently. And we talked about different formulas, like off camera we were talking about, it could be on a one-to-one basis, when people get comfortable they could go into groups. But how do we deal with the problem of illiteracy from a more simple standard position where, again, when the child comes home and says, "Mom, can you help me with this?" and the parent does not have the capability of doing that, what do we do, okay, Dr. Boyd?
Well, it goes back to it being an individual thing. First and foremost, value has to be placed on education, on learning, on rising above where you currently are. If you, as an individual, value education to the point where you're not going to let anything or anybody stand in your way in terms of an obstacle, then you're going to place that time, that energy, those monetary resources in that direction. So for example, there's individuals that will stand in line an entire night or entire day for a pair of Jordans. If individuals value Jordans that much, then if there becomes a shift in the value system where the Jordans aren't the priority, but it's becoming more knowledgeable in the areas of deficiency, such as reading, then here's the thing. They're going to stay up late nights, past certain types of limits and achieve what it is that they're looking for in terms of outcomes. So you have to look at it in terms of what are you expecting in terms of an outcome? If you are desiring to go above and beyond just high school, for example, then you know that there's going to be a certain amount of discipline that you're going to have to put forth, as well as time, as well as energy, which all combined is going to be the equivalent of work that has to be set aside for a time period in order to accomplish the certain predetermined outcome that you're looking for. So what's
Right.
the outcome? So what are you looking for in terms of an outcome? Or are you just content with being where you currently are and not rising above that? So you take this from an individual level. And from an individual level, every household is going to be different. So you have individuals coming in not knowing English. How
Okay.
much time?
That's true.
How much
Yeah.
time do they
Yeah.
spend
Right.
getting acclimated to our culture in order for them to function well enough to get what it is that they expect in terms of outcomes? They're still looking for jobs. They are still having family to take care of.
Right.
But at the same time, within their 24 hours, they're still finding that time and applying time to be invested, to learn.
And you mentioned motivation and commitment.
Yes.
Those are the two mainstays of what you're talking about here.
Motivation
Because
and commitment,
adult
yes.
learners, okay, adult learners, and this was we're dealing with adult learners now. We're trying to motivate these parents and these adults to take their lives to another level.
Right.
But they're adults. They're like we instill in our children. Yeah, you go to school, you go to high school and you graduate and you either get a job or you go to college or what have you. But now we're dealing with adults that have been illiterate for, say, 2 generations before their children were even born. So you're saying that they have to have that commitment and that motivation as adult learners to go to another level. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that, and I want to add, because we are adults, we tend to look at what society has presented us to the point that we currently are. So we've been exposed to a lot in terms of good, bad, and indifference. However, in terms of what it is that the individual would really like in terms of an outcome, strategically, that goal has to be written down. Now, we all have what we want to accomplish in our heads.
Right.
But not until you write that goal down does it become something substantial where you can reflect on that on a daily basis. At the end of the day, reflection is going to be a part of this whole process.
I like that.
Whereby
I like that.
whereby you have to say, out of the 24 hours that just passed, how much have I worked towards accomplishing this goal that I wrote down?
I like that.
Okay.
Love it.
So in terms of us looking at individuals who are classified as functionally literate or functionally illiterate,
Yeah.
you have to look at it in terms of, if we do an intake of all the individuals who have now said, you know what, I'm not satisfied where I'm at, I want to go higher.
Right.
I'm going to make a commitment to myself that I am going to learn how to do more in terms of expanding my vocabulary, reading more. A lot of things that, if I shift, have come into play in terms of me asking individuals, do you visit the library and do you have a library card? This is a free public resource that individuals who are learning English as a second language tend to utilize because they want to rise above where they currently are. Okay.
Right.
So it's going to be a process whereby you identify what I call my 5 Ps. Now, of course, I got these 5 Ps from some other place and I combined them, but in all reality, they are reusable and relevant to everybody. The first one is purpose. What's your why? Why are you doing what you're doing, or why are you not doing what you're doing? Okay. The next one is process. That means that you're going to have to dedicate some time and energy, as well as some resources, to actually walk a journey that you've already transcribed onto a piece of paper that you're going to plan on reflecting on daily in order to make sure that within 24 hours you're accomplishing something towards that goal. Preparation. All right. First of all, everything we do, everything we say starts off with how we think. So our thinking has to be shifted into an arena whereby we understand that we are trying to accomplish something. So preparation is going to be the how, and how we incorporate either other individuals or other types of resources. What are we going to gather? Preparation. Am I ready? When I go into a classroom, did I bring my pen and my paper, or did I just show up? That doesn't show that you're prepared for the class. That doesn't show that you're in student mode. Okay.
It doesn't show a commitment. Like you said.
It doesn't show a commitment. But here's the thing: if you are exposed to the right instructor, the right teacher, that individual is going to plant a seed to get you on that right track, whereby they're showing that they value you as an individual to take you to the next level. Because for every student that I come in contact with, all of them have respective exposures to society in this world in general. However, I always let them know, I am going to build on where you are. So we're going to take this from one level, you coming in fresh, and I'm going to build right on top of that. Okay. And so by getting exposed to the right individual who values them as an individual and understands that life is occurring and understands that education is the process and understands that they need to be prepared, let's take this journey together. So I already touched on 3. Let's go to the next one. Patience. Patience is important because so often we run out of patience with ourselves more than anything. Yes, there's individuals that we come in contact with that we're, engaging with, and we may not have patience for this, that, and other. As a matter of fact, we don't have patience for a 2-minute timer on the microwave nowadays. Okay, so patience really has to be valued from the perspective that if you're going to take a journey, you can't blink or snap your fingers and be at the end of that journey.
Well, people got to understand that this is a process. It's not an event. This is a process. This is not instant gratification.
Nope,
it doesn't, you can't learn to read overnight or anything like that. So, it's a long-term commitment. If you take baby steps, we can get somewhere. But if people are going to think they're getting instant gratification in this particular environment, they're not going to get it.
What I've learned along my journey, I call myself a lifelong student, because here's the thing: every day we're taking in different things. Okay, so you have to really shift how it is that you think about things, because perspective is everything. You could say that this glass is half full or half empty. It's all the way you perceive it. It's half full to me if I know that at a particular level I could have this cup running over. It's half empty if all I'm thinking about is taking out of it and just drinking it to the bottom. Okay? If I know that it can be refilled at half full, that means that eventually I have to stop because it'll overflow. Which means I need to then take a sip. It's all about inputs and outputs. And overall, it's about outcomes. My last P is promotion. So after having identified the purpose, going through the process, identified the preparation of that journey within that process, incorporated patience in that, then comes the promotion. Does that mean promotion in your job? It could be, but it could also mean promotion in terms of where it is that your starting point was to where you currently are. So if you start at a certain level, once you add any sort of positive and productive layer on top of that, you're going to be at a different level from where you started. So that promotion is going from level to level.
And it's baby steps. It's baby steps. And like you just explained the whole dynamics of where people need to get themselves to. Nobody could explain that in a simplistic manner that you did to the average individual, because just a simple thing. One of the simple things that you said today was get yourself a library card. people don't even know that if they get a library card, that could be their journey to higher ground. But do the people in public education, if they detect, like we talked about off camera, these teachers know the aptitude of the parents, because when they have the interaction with the parents, they know where these parents are.
Right.
If the parent shows up, put a tie and a nice suit on, then they know that this parent has some kind of job or whatever. And then another parent comes in, maybe their hair is not combed or anything, and they ask them to write down their address on the card. They know where these parents are.
No.
So,
yeah, they actually
so
absolutely. Absolutely.
So why would you think that, okay, if the teacher detects this, then you would think that maybe they would take the extra step to maybe pull the parent to the side and say, hey, can I assist you with anything? Do you have anything that you maybe want, some needs? And this is, this is the engagement that we need to have for the holistic approach to getting these families, onto another level.
Right. As a superintendent, here's one of the things that strikes me as significant in that whole process. Getting down to the foundational level of understanding individuals and meeting them from a person to person in terms of interrelationship. If there's no relationship, then basically you're just a number. Okay, so if you're just a number to me, then you have no real value to me besides just being a number.
Right.
So in terms of investment into you as an individual, there's going to be varying degrees of involvement. So if I sit you down in terms of a group of parents, I need to identify what it is that is a gap between where you currently are and what our outcomes are going to be as a village. And speaking of a village, it's known that it takes a village to raise a child. However, a lot of our villages have been dismantled, and individuals that come from different villages are now taking a major role in how it is that they're shaping and exposing students, particularly in urban environments, to a variety of things that ultimately, going back to the illiteracy issue, are not being addressed appropriately. Okay, so it's all about exposure. Who are you being exposed to first, and what are they exposing you to? Who is preparing you, or who is not preparing you? And what are they preparing you for, or what are they not preparing you for? So you have to get down to the bare bones of things to get an understanding of what it is that our true outcomes are actually supposed to be relative to what the outcomes are going to be from a strategic perspective. Because if I have a value for the people, that means that education in terms of its process is going to produce the type of outcome that is well beyond a 50% literacy rate.
All right. Well, this is an interesting conversation, and I think that we're going to want to continue this. But, we appreciate you coming in and giving your perspective. And you would make one heck of a superintendent, I tell you that. But anyway,
Thank you.
I'm not trying to bait you into anything in terms of your career aspirations. But this was a very interesting conversation, and I hope that our listening audience got a little something out of it. But we have to go back to the point to where 50% of a population not being able to read is a very, very troubling reality to our society, and we need to really and truly take stock in that and try to find people like yourself to explain to people that, hey, this is not acceptable. We cannot go another decade with people being left behind, because that's basically what they're being done. They're just being left behind because the world just keeps on turning.
Right.
you know, and like, it doesn't care if you're here or not. But if you, back to what you were saying, if you have the commitment and the motivation, then you can accomplish leaps and bounds in terms of your own personal walk in your journey in life. You did it through some very, very, I mean, just to be, you know, the sacrifice that you made to take care of your mom is something that, you know, people need to really appreciate when they look at a person like yourself. And especially the people that we're talking about, like if Maya Bowen can make it, then I can do it as well.
Yeah, you surely can. You surely can, but you got to make a commitment to yourself that you want to do it. If you want to do it, you're going to do it. Just like individuals do what they do on a daily basis. They make the commitment to get that thing done, and it gets done. If you make the commitment and you put forth the work that's involved in it, you're going to get it done.
Well, I'll tell you this. The analogy that you made about people standing in line for a pair of Jordans, we will hope that people are standing in line to wait until the library opens up.
With that commitment, they surely will be.
So we want to thank you for coming in. And like I said, we want to continue this conversation. So to our listening audience, we thank you for listening. And like, you know, this is another segment of accesstv.org. We're going to hear the undisputed truth and some things that people don't want you to hear. So thank you so much.